Okay, good afternoon everybody. I'm here today to do the installation video for the RogueWorx Type 12 CNC aluminium bolts. I have two versions here, the two prototypes that we got from our factory. This is the red factory anodized one and the plain aluminium one. I've also got some of the other examples. I mean, these are this one's a polycarbonate model. It was just for testing the process, really. This one's an ABS version in orange. We have a stock bolt here. This one's been slightly polished on a few sides, and a bog standard bolt as well. So I'm going to be putting this plain aluminium one into this KC02. As you can see, this KC02 is a little bit different from usual. This was a stubby one that I built a while ago. It's got the blue ABS 3D printed Type 11 RogueWorx bolt, so the predecessor to our production one here. And it's also got a beautiful gold SneakWorks Type GL charging handle. So here we have the RogueWorx bolt, CNC'd from a single piece of aluminium, 6061 grade, which is aircraft and weapons grade aluminium. A lot of M4 upper receivers are made out of 6061 aluminium. So we have lots of nice features on here. We've radiused these cam ramps, we've shortened it, it's half the weight of the standard one. See the machining quality on here. It's gorgeous. I've widened the shoulder here to increase the strength there. We've widened the contact face here to increase the strength. We've chamfered this arch and got rid of the square cutouts that you can see here. We've got rid of that. We've increased, decreased the thickness of this section of it so it clears the trigger mechanism better when the bolt goes forward. We've radiused these edges here to relieve any fatigue there, and many other small tweaks and changes just to improve the design over the standard one. So one of the small things which I've already mentioned requires the only modification for this to be a drop-in part is we radiused these corners just here, which is one of the most common break points on the standard bolt. Now I've got a few charging handles here. If I set this on here, you can see the only modification that is necessary on this is you just have to round off one edge of your charging handle, this corner where it sits on the bolt, just to make sure that it'll sit nice and flat. It's slightly raised up at the minute, so I'll be rounding off the edge of one of these charging handles later in the video. Anyway, how to install RogueWorx bolt into your KC02. So firstly, make sure you're not cocked. Put your safety catch into the middle here, so you've got the red ring on one side. If you push it the other way, you've got a black ring. You want it in between the two so that it can remove from the housing without catching. So you're going to want a 4mm Allen key or hex key, whatever you want to call them. And with a longer bolt, don't lose the washer. The longer bolt, the 20mm bolt, goes in the bottom. And the shorter bolt washer go in the back. So it should now be able to lift out the receiver. Put the stock to one side. Excuse my squeaky chair. As you can see, I'm keeping it vertical because I don't want the pins to drop out. If you're wondering what pins, that would be these three. You have buffer pin and your two trigger mechanism retaining pins, which pop out the sides here. These are usually covered in grease, so have some paper towels ready. Those three pins out. You can now just lift out your trigger mechanism. As you can see, mine's nicely coated with molybdenum Teflon grease, molybdenum disulfide. Nice and grey and sticky in there, because these are all metal on metal parts. So you want them all nicely lubricated with Teflon grease. Yeah, we won't be messing with that at all, so I'll put that to one side over here. And we're left with the upper receiver, with the hop unit, barrel. We won't be messing with any of that either. So you can see the blue bolt in here now. Pull it back until it's past the bolt catch. Reach in with your finger and just lift up the nozzle whilst holding the bolt handle back far enough that it misses the bolt catch. So that's your bolt carrier, piston, nozzle, impasse, all of that. That comes out nice and clean. And whilst I'm here, I'm going to swap out that gold charging handle just so that I can show you the modification required on the standard one. I use my little pokey stick here just to lever out the back of the recoil spring. This is all covered in silicone oil. Take out the shiny gold charging handle. Let's just grab a bit of paper towel and just wipe down the charging handle. I know it's not exactly tactical, but I just couldn't resist this gold charging handle from RogueWorx to go with my super short carbon wrapped KC02. I don't normally have this big silver suppressor on it. That's from another one of my guns. I just had the suppressor on to try and keep the noise down whilst I was testing it in the garage. So let's put the charging handle to one side with the collection. Recoil spring can go over here for now. See if there's any dirt in here. It's always a good idea, because that Teflon grease from the trigger mechanism, that gets everywhere. So just give everything a wipe down. It's always best to replace your lubricants every time you strip it. Can't see any damage on the nozzle here. All looks good to me. This one's particularly stiff. It's been sat in a box for a while since the last version of this that I was testing. So, paper towel. I've given this a good clean several times in the past, so it's not. I don't have to go crazy in here. You could get the ear cleaner buds and get all in the corners in here if there was some dirt or dust or anything stuck in here from some of your game days, but you might not be able to see, but I can see it's perfectly clean in here. You can see some of the wear marks from the metal inside the receiver. Other than that, it's nice and clean. Still got good movement on the bolt catch. So I'll put the upper receiver to one side. Down here with the stock. Here's the bolt. So we're going to be swapping in this RogueWorx one. Okay, So first thing we want to do is remove this roll pin here, for which I have some very technical tools. We have a block of wood, 2 nails, and a hammer. I just want to take that, line it up on there. Which one of my nails was it? Got these nails obviously because they self-center in the roll pin, and the block of wood with a hole underneath means it has somewhere to go. Lightly tap it, and just like that, the roll pin drops out underneath. Now take a nail back out, and I should be able to just ease that forward. You can see there's now a gap there. You can see where the back of the piston is. Just stick a screwdriver in there, just lever it forwards. You can see the tail of this piston. This particular piston is one of the TSC O-ring pistons, which I drilled some ports into the top of myself because I didn't have a spare Kevin Forney piston laying around. As you can see, the tail of it is wrapped with a fairly good amount of PTFE tape, which helps it sit nice and snugly inside the bolt carrier. Let me just see if I can change the field of view on my camera. There we go, I've zoomed in a little bit for you now. Yeah. I'm using a RunCam 2 if anyone's bothered. It's the camera from my quadcopter. I'm using that because it live streams to my phone here, so I can actually see what my camera sees. There you go, a little inception moment for you there. And I'm recording on the microphone just using a random voice recorder app on a second phone that I've got. So, we've separated the piston and nozzle. As you can see, it's got an end pass in there, which at the minute is set to max power. So let's see how it fits in a RogueWorx bolt. Absolutely perfect. There's almost no movement there on the tail. I'm just trying to wiggle it up and down. If we look through the hole as well, you can see the tail of the piston going past there. Beautiful. So, I'm just going to grab my PTFE tape and some scissors, because it's always easier to do this with scissors than trying to tear PTFE tape, because it just rolls up. Sorry if my voice is rather croaky. You can probably tell from my wristband, I was at the Electric Daisy Carnival for dance music festival for the last 3 days, so I've not got much voice left at the minute. So we're just going to want to get, this stuff is so thin, so thin. It's thinner than paper, this is thinner than cling film. This is what plumbers use for sealing pipes, by the way. If you run it into threads on a bolt and then tighten the bolt down onto it, it will create a waterproof seal. So easy for this to roll up on itself, and you just have to start again. Treat it like you are handling a butterfly. And this first piece I'm just going to want to wrap around the tail of my piston to help retain that tiny pin, retain and seal that tiny pin that holds the nozzle return spring. Okay. I'm going to take another piece, as I like to wrap it around the tail of the piston itself, the actual notch where the roll pin goes, as it helps keep it nice and snug, prevents any movement on the piston. You don't have to be quite as careful with this one as you expect the roll pin to bite into it when you force it through the bolt. There we go, so let's give it a nice solid wrapping there. So I should now be able to insert this into the bolt carrier. It should be nice and snug. It's not quite touching there, so I'm just going to add a little bit more PTFE around the pin. Okay, let's try again. That's nice and snug now. There we go. I can actually push the head of the piston through the gas port just to make sure it's all the way back, and that the notch through the hole for the roll pin to go into is nicely lined up. So now we bring in our technical block of wood. We get the roll pin. This one's quite worn, but I should be able to tell one end is more tapered than the other from being hammered into place. And it looks like this one. Let's sit that in there. And just tap it in. It's got stuck about halfway. Probably where it's biting in to the PTFE tape. So, I don't want to start hammering the surface of the bolt, so we'll just finish it off with a larger nail just to get it to sit flush. Try not to hit the camera with the hammer here. Just go over to one side slightly. And there we go. The roll pin is just below the surface of the aluminium, and it's not quite sticking out the other side. And I can see that it's nicely bitten in on the PTFE tape that retains the piston. So I can put the PTFE tape to one side and my technical nails and the hammer and the technical block of wood. That is piston, nozzle and end pass installed into the bolt carrier now. I'm just going to get my lubes. So the two that I've got for this particular job, a thin Abbey silicone gun oil and a thick Abbey silicone gun grease. As you can see, this is like sort of a Vaseline type consistency. It's like a jelly. Whereas this one is an oil that comes out in drops, much thinner. Both are pure silicone, as far as I'm aware, and they can mix with each other. It's not a problem if some silicone oil goes in the same place as some silicone grease. That's the beauty of it. I was just wiping my hands there. So I should have done this before I installed the nozzle, but it would have been a lot messier to show you. So what I'm going to do, just going to get some silicone grease on my pinky. Just try and get it anywhere I can see. Well, basically anywhere on the nozzle where it's going to interact with the bolt carrier. Just get it everywhere, really. A bit more grease. Try not to extend your nozzle out too far, as you'll be stretching your return spring. I'm being very careful here. Grease on the sides here, grease on top, get some more, put it over here, nice and clean. Run some along the bottom here as well. And that'll do, really. I mean, the oil is going to spread out when we put it into the gun anyway. Anything that isn't lubed probably will do when I put the oil back in the upper receiver. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is just going to modify this charging handle so that it sits nicely on the bolt carrier. So what I have to do on that is just round off these two forward edges. I'm going to go do it on my bench grinder, though you could do it with metal files or a Dremel, anything with any sort of metal grinding ability. So I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. So, as you can see, I've rounded off this edge here and this edge here. It literally took about 10 seconds on my bench grinder, and then I tidied it up with one of these little needle files just to make sure that I could get right into the corner there where it meets the handle. Just nice and rounded it so that it sits in that nice radius edge just there. And it sits flush on the other side too. Okay, so I should be able to put it back in the upper receiver now. Just grab that. There we are. So here's our receiver, and we're going to want to get the return spring and the bolt handle back in first. So I find it's easiest. Put that through there. Get the rod through the charging handle. And then get some pliers. And get it down into position. And just slot the return spring back into its little notch. I just hit the camera. Turn the lights on so you can see. So just get the return spring back where it came from. So that slides smoothly. See if I can move the camera towards me a bit. There we go. It's kind of late afternoon right now, so the light outside's starting to fade and it's raining anyway, so you'll just have to put up with the desk lights, making this wavy pattern. Okay, so let's drop in some fresh oil. Because we want the bolt to move nice and quickly, I'm only going to use the gun oil for this, and just put a few drops in there, and I'm going to make sure I get one on the return spring as well. Because the bolt's brand new, I'm going to get a little dot of the oil, the grease, sorry, the gun grease, my finger. I'm just going to lightly cover most of the surfaces just to make it nice and receptive to the oil. Get a little bit more. You don't want it plastered in it, you just want a thin sheen of the silicone grease. You could do this with the oil as well, to be honest. I'm just making sure that all the surfaces are covered where there's going to be contact. Okay. Get the lid on the grease. Okay. So pull your charging handle back, hold it there. Get your bolt. Drop it in. And that's it. That's the bolt carrier on the charging handle, seated in the upper receiver. So, next up, you're going to want to put your trigger mech back on. So, just get it, drop it on there. Get your 2 pins from earlier. Make sure they go all the way through. Second one. These are identical, it doesn't matter which one's front and back. And then don't forget your great big buffer pin. Goes in the top slot, like that. Get the oil out the way. Now we can get the stock. Like that. Let me raise the camera back up again. Okay. Get your upper receiver, make sure your safety is still in the center, and just lower it in. You're going to want to put the tail in first, make sure all the pins are in, and just let it sit down on its own. And then get your 4mm hex key. Thin the shorter of the 2 bolts in the back with the washer. Get that lightly in there. Flip it upside down. Get the longer one. In there. Just give them a little pinch. They're not going to be super tight. Just enough that they won't come undone, which is what those washers are for anyway. And that's it. Let's see. Cocks and racks. I can already tell that sounds like a very sharp action. So next up is the test video. Thank you for watching.